Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining tonight's webinar. We're a smaller group, but that's fantastic. It's the day before Halloween, and this will also be sent as a recording because I did hit the record button, which I forgot to do in the last one. So thank you so much for coming. And what we're going to be talking about today is warming foods, how to make winter a bit more tolerable. So as you either have any questions or comments or what have you, just type them into the little chat spot, as well as if there's any issues with my audio or video or anything, just let me know, because I want to make sure things are working well. So let's dive in. There we go. So what we're going to be talking about today is what is seasonal eating. So what does that really mean, as well as what symptoms to watch for? Because you don't have to eat seasonally perfectly all the time. You don't have to throw out all of your favorite foods and suddenly eat all of the fall and winter foods. You can combine them, but I invite you to at least look for the symptoms of imbalance. So when you know that you need to add some more of the warming foods. So let's talk about those. We're going to be looking at what fall and winter foods are, as well as what does it look like in real life. And then we're going to look at sugar craving busters, why are sugar cravings so much higher in the winter and how to solve those. And then a bonus I added at the end of this presentation is how to fight colds and flus. So we're going to kind of talk about my food and supplement tool chest when it comes to fighting colds and flus. So if you are new to the world of me, thank you so much for watching this webinar. My name is Lisa Kilgour. I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, and that I've been the case for 10 years this month. So I believe I got my card saying I am fully a holistic nutritionist in October of 2007. Since then, I've worked with well over 1,000 clients and with a variety of issues, diets, and concerns. So I've worked in many areas. I spent a couple of years working in integrated cancer care. I specialize in digestion and hard digestive cases and been doing that for 7 or 8 years, and adrenal fatigue and all the big guys. What I've been working on the most lately is helping people create the diet or the way of life, the way of eating that works for them. So it's not following anything, it's not counting anything. It is really just happiness and bliss in food. And that's my passion for everybody. I haven't always eaten the way that I do now. I'm stubborn and slow, and I change very slowly. And my diet used to be entirely processed and sugary and terrible. And when it comes to seasons, I haven't always loved winter. I still don't really love it. Summer is by far my favorite season. But when I started bringing in fall and winter foods, that made a huge difference. And I have a few stories for you as we go. So let's see if we can all start enjoying winter. Maybe not as much as the person on the right. I don't know if I would bare my belly if it was actually cold outside, but you know, we do what we got to do for a photo. So what is seasonal eating? What does that really look like? What this means is respecting the season and also respecting what our body needs in that season. The idea of eating whatever we want anytime we want. That can be lettuce in January or apples in June is a fairly new idea. Even when I was a kid, strawberries weren't in season in the winter. They were only in season in June, making them special. And now we get them whenever we want. And that has caused some issues. What it can lead to are symptoms and imbalances. So what I'm inviting you to do is simply look at your diet a little differently and maybe looking at places that you can shift. We kind of do it automatically. As soon as the weather cools down, we put on nice cozy sweaters and we want stew and soups. I made an amazing beef stew this weekend, which in August would be the last food on earth I wanted to eat. But instead, on Saturday, when it was in my crock pot all day, all I could think about was how good it was. And I woke up on Sunday morning thinking, ooh, I get more stew. Yeah, I'm not actually a foodie, but when you are eating foods that your body wants, it can make you really excited because your body's like, wow, this is fantastic. And so it's really looking at eating foods that warm us when the weather is cool and foods that cool us down when the weather is hot. And the good news is nature provides that exactly. So if we go with what is available, then we have a better chance at eating properly or eating seasonally, and that can reduce symptoms. So, what some of the symptoms of not eating seasonally, and the biggest one is being really, 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 really cold and not being able to warm up. The best story I can tell you about this one was a woman that I met with. I met at Nature's Fair. Oh, it was probably 2 years ago, and I was standing at my table waiting for my next client. I do free half-hour consults there, and she came up to my table with her husband, and she was a raw foodist. And this is the time of the year was January, February, but it was when the weather was just starting to turn. It was probably 5 or 6 degrees outside. We were getting glimmers of sunshine. It wasn't a bad day. And so she came up to my table and she wanted me to tell her husband that he needs to eat more raw foods. But it's still January or February. And so I said, no, actually, what's in season right now is more of the warming foods. And it's a bit too cold outside to be eating only raw all the time. And she was open to that idea. I'm really grateful for how open she was, because she really was open and she listened. She was, I think, a little frustrated that I didn't agree with her and tell her husband that he needs to eat more raw, because instead I turned it around and said, keep eating all of those wonderful vegetables, but warm them up a bit. Maybe have some soup, have some stew. And her eyes lit up and said, oh, that would be great. So that also is a sign her body wasn't so happy. Then she turned to walk away. And when I saw what she was wearing, I really understood that this diet wasn't working for her. So she had this big parka on, this really, really thick parka, and snow pants. Remember, this is February and it was 6 degrees outside. It wasn't minus 20 anymore. It was at a time of the year when 6 degrees equals open jacket and no scarf. And a few minutes later, she comes back to my table and to ask me another question. And I point out her snow pants, and I said, your snow pants are a sign you're really cold. And I'd asked her about her temperature before, and she had said she was really cold. You need some warm foods. I'm begging you to go home and have some soup. And then she leaned in and whispered, I wear these inside my house. So this was a woman who was eating all raw foods because she'd been told this is healthier for her. And the symptom was being so cold, she was wearing snow pants and a parka in her own house. So this is the benefit of warming foods. And in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine, cooked foods are the healing ones. So don't forget to incorporate some more cooked foods. We all tolerate a different amount of raw in the winter, but don't have so much raw that you're wearing snow pants inside. You can also feel tired, depressed, foggy, lethargic, really just having not enough energy. Sometimes that's from eating too many warm comfort foods, but a lot of the time that's from not eating eating out of season. Ayurvedic principles is something I use a lot with myself and with a handful of my clients. And it's a traditional Indian form of medicine that's about 5,000 years old. It is about the same age as traditional Chinese medicine, and they were very close to each other. There's the Himalayas between these two countries. And there's a argument on which one came first. Particularly, there's an argument that Ayurvedic doctors may have brought the point of acupuncture to traditional Chinese medicine, therefore they're older. I don't think it really matters when we're talking about many thousands of years ago, but it is a very old traditional form of medicine. It's still used today, and it gives energetic properties to food. So it's more than just the nutritional side, that math that doesn't really work of nutrition. It's also bringing other aspects to it. So when we eat out of balance for this time of year, for the fall and winter, we can feel really possessive. In the fall, we can actually get really spun and kind of unable to concentrate. That stops in the winter, but in the fall, when the winds are blowing, you can feel that way, as well as you can have a higher tendency of emotional eating. And that's simply a sign that your diet is a little out of balance for the season. So what are fall and winter foods? Very simply, they're foods that can be grown locally and are picked in the fall or can be stored all winter. Everybody's food budget is different, and while I highly recommend local foods if you can afford it, I also understand that not everybody's budget can afford it. So instead, think about what could be grown locally and get it where you can afford it. I'm finding amazing deals at a lot of the farmers markets as well. And you can I've picked up bags and bags of apples as well as squashes. And they're very good price, and they do store if you store them properly. Apples and pears are the main fruit that is fall and winter fruits. They are picked in the fall. Around where I live, they're still on the trees in many places. And these are fruits that are hard enough that they really store well, particularly apples. And it used to be, before we had refrigeration, that smaller towns would put their apples in bags and throw them into the lake as a way to refrigerate them, and that would keep them all winter. So it's just a sign that our bodies have had these foods for a long time and understands what these chilly wet fruits do, that they do have a warming side to them, and then we make them extra warming by throwing them into a pie. Squash and root vegetables, they do an amazing job at storing all winter. Squash are amazing. I had a pile of squash actually behind me for the last year or so. I've had a variety of different squash. They're squashes that I bought last fall and were kind of eating through the year, and I had them out so I didn't remember to eat them. Now they're in my kitchen because I was still forgetting to eat those. And what was I found really interesting was the moment it got really warm, they just all started rotting. So any of the ones that I didn't get to eat all just kind of rotted. And I have one left beside my plant, and it's been doing pretty good all summer, even though it's completely stored improperly, and it's actually okay. But squash do an amazing job at lasting all winter. Same thing with root vegetables, and that's potatoes, sweet potatoes, parsnips, carrots, beets. Those all store really, really well. They all store slightly differently, but many of them in just a cool room or a root cellar, they can store a long time. I remember when I was a teenager and my stepmother pulled out a bag of carrots out of the fridge, and it was March at this time, and they looked terrible, and they were growing, like they were sprouting. And she pulled one out and she said, you know that spring is coming because the food started looking terrible. And it was a sign that we are at the end of the food that was being stored for the winter, and that it's time now for nature to take over. And I never really thought about the seasons that way before, and it's always stuck with me. Garlic, onions, and ginger. Ginger isn't really local, but it is a wonderfully warming food. Garlic and onions store really, really well. So does ginger, especially in the freezer if you want to make sure your ginger doesn't dry out. And these warm you up. Ginger in particular. If you're cold to the bone, have something with ginger in it. That could be a tea. It could be, I add it to, anytime I do a stir fry, I just grate it into my stir fry. I did that tonight. And there's times, especially if I'm fighting a cold or a flu, or I'm getting over one, my body wants to be warmed up to kind of burn that off. And once I made this beautiful curry, it was my favorite curry, and for a bunch of friends, and I watched them all take their sweaters off by the time we were done, because it had so much ginger in it, and I didn't even really taste it, that they felt too hot. So ginger is a great way to warm up, but garlic and onions do that as well. And then dark leafy greens are another family of fall and winter foods. I've grown kale in my backyard and watched how beautifully green the leaves are all winter. I could go out and pick some off and use them. In the springtime, when they thawed, they did like die, but the plant stayed alive and started growing right away. So kale and collard greens, I will still eat chard, even though it's not really in season, but it still has a bit more warmth than a lettuce green will. So these are great ways of getting your greens, even when it's not really salad season anymore. So what does fall eating look like? And I added this slide just as I was about to come on, because I realized I didn't tell you what it actually looks like. And it's all about just bringing some warmth to your food. One time, many years ago, I was working from home. It was when I lived in Toronto, and it was my first of many cold, drafty apartments. I'm not sure why I attract cold, drafty apartments. I'm currently living in a cold and drafty house, and like all of them, expensive to heat as well. This one at least has a wood burning stove, so sometimes I can get warm. And in this cold and drafty house, I was kind of used to the temperature in general, but I was still a little chilly. And I was about to go on a conference call, and I thought, okay, I need something to eat because I'm cold, and cold to me it always means I need to eat something. And so then I thought, well, why don't I make a smoothie that's healthy and good for me, and I can sip on it while I do this conference call. This is when I learned how terrible cold foods are in the winter. By the time I finished this smoothie, I was so unbelievably cold. I had to put mittens on, and I wanted to put a toque on. I couldn't warm up until I made dinner and had a properly warm food. So it's all about not adding cold into your body. So soups and stews are a wonderful way to warm you up instead of salads. But when you're having cooler foods, because sometimes you just like it, and that's okay. But adding things like cinnamon or ginger to your juices or smoothies can warm them up, as well as not having them ice cold, bringing them up to room temperature. I was famous in that office for leaving my salad in a sunbeam in the winter because I still was making salads in the winter. This was 10 years ago. But I knew I didn't want to eat it if it was right out of the fridge. It was horrible. And so I would put it in them in a sunbeam to warm them up for a few hours. But bringing it up to room temperature and then also adding that ginger, cinnamon, anything that's spicy or warming. Turmeric is a bit cooling, but everything turmeric comes with is warming. So you can balance it off that way as well, because turmeric gets added to a lot of things right now. So just keep in mind, it in of itself is cooling, but the co-spices like cumin and ginger and cinnamon and black pepper are all warming. So they manage to balance out. So making sure you're doing that. So when I do my fresh juices in the wintertime, I juice a lot of beets. I juice a lot of those seasonal vegetables, but I also throw in an inch of ginger, and that makes it not cold and not damp and not difficult for my body. For me in the winter, in the fall and winter, I do a lot of grilled sandwiches, and I throw avocado on everything. And so avocado isn't really a winter food at all. It's grown where it's too hot. It's grown at places hotter than this. But it's fatty, and that fattiness gives some oomph to your food and can be warming on its own as long as it's not ice cold. So what I do on often in the wintertime is if I'm having a sandwich, I throw it on the grill, or I throw it in a pan and make it like I would grilled cheese, but I don't. Me and dairy don't get along, so I don't do cheese. And I started doing it because I was craving grilled cheese, and really I was just craving a hot sandwich. So I grill a lot, I warm up my food, and then it feels so good. And when I work from home, I can do that easily because I have a kitchen nearby. But in offices, if you don't have a hot plate, then take things out of the fridge and make sure they come at least up to room temperature, and they'll feel so much better. Sugar cravings are really, really, really common at this time of the year. They kind of get worse, and this can be from when at times where your body is not as happy as it would like to be seasonally. Your meal might have been a bit too cold or too damp, and it's asking for sugar for the warmth. More sugar literally brings calories that we can warm our insides up with, particularly chocolate because it's just so lovely and warming on its own. So look at your sugar cravings as a bit of information, and we've looked at different reasons why sugar cravings can come about, and eating out of season is just one of them. So look at are you having more sugar cravings after having something like a salad? Maybe if you're having it in the evening, and that could be that your whole diet, your day of eating, what you didn't have enough. Maybe you're looking to lose weight, so you're trying to reduce the amount of food that you're eating and eating really light things, and those feel okay for breakfast and lunch, but then suddenly in the evening, your body's like, yeah, I so need some just and out comes sugar cravings. So look at your sugar cravings as simply a sign, and this can be one of them. And so bringing in things like sweet root vegetables like carrots and sweet potatoes can do a great job at curbing sugar cravings. Having some cacao or sugar or dark chocolate can also really, really help your sugar cravings. One of my favorite breakfasts is steel cut oats or just a rolled oat, depending on how my gut is doing. Steel cut oats, which are a heartier breakfast, really good for you, except for if you have any irritation in your digestive system and then they're way too scratchy. So then go for the rolled oats. So it would be one of those oats with some raw cacao and a banana, and sometimes a bit of maple syrup if the banana's not sweet enough. And I not only is it a glorious way to start your day, a giant pile of chocolate. It's full of magnesium and it has that sweetness that my body wants, but in the high fiber form of raw cacao, steel cut oats, and a banana. So that's a way to also warm yourself up from the inside and give your body the flavors it's looking for, because it's looking for something in particular when it wants chocolate. So I wanted to add a bonus. And so we have these 2 slides are on cold and flu busters. So these are the things that I have on hand to help if I'm getting a cold or a flu. And then I have a recipe in the next slide that you can try out and as a homemade cold and flu buster. So the first one that I just brought into my life this year is elderberry. Elderberry is an amazing antiviral. It actually binds to viruses, including H1N1 and the avian flu. These are scary viruses, and it's research proven. So if you want to see those studies, just send me an email and I'll send you those studies. So elderberry is a deep purple berry, deeper than blueberries, and it has the same antioxidant anthocyanin that blueberries have, just much more concentrated. And it's the power of this antioxidant that makes it antiviral. You can get it in crystals. So this is what's in my life now, is just elderberry crystals. And it's this product that made it easier for me because it's just crystals. When I need it, I add it to water and I drink it. And it's not sweetened. A bit of honey would make it taste better. It's not terrible though. And I can use it when I need it. The other option for elderberry, which I have used in the past, but I always forget to finish my bottle, is elderberry syrup. And the issue with that one, it tastes really good. It's really lovely and it totally works. My issue is that you have to use the bottle within 10 days, and so I can't have it on hand. And it's usually in the evening when I realize I'm coming down with something. And you can also get it in a tincture, and I haven't tried the tincture yet, but I will be trying it this winter. When you take elderberry, you can not only it not only binds to viruses and saved me from 2 viruses this fall already, but it also reduces the duration and the severity of your cold or flu, and that's also research proven. I can send you that study as well. Raw garlic, we've been using this one forever, and it is potent natural antibiotic and antiviral. But the key with raw garlic is you need a fresh clove, not a jar of raw garlic, because that one, they've been cut when it's been already minced for you. You've just lost some of the medicinal properties because it's been sitting out for a long time. So what you need to do is chop it up really small or crush it, and then let it sit for 10 minutes. And the reason for that is there are 2 chemicals, and I forget their names, in the garlic that once the oxygen becomes a part of the garlic, they become the potent antibiotic antiviral called allicin. And so it's only when they combine that it becomes this amazing property. So then you can take it as a pill, like you just put it in your mouth and swallow it. You can eat it. You can add it to your food. I add it to mashed sweet potatoes. I'll add some roasted garlic and then some raw garlic, and heaven. You can add it to guacamole, do whatever you want. And in the recipe I have next has it in it as well. Oregano oil is been in my tool cupboard for about 10 years. And I don't think, not coincidentally, I haven't had strep throat in 10 years. I used to get strep throat at least once a winter, and at worst 3 times in a winter. And that was not a good winter. I had measles that year. It was a bad year. But most of the time is once or twice, always involved antibiotics. And since the first winter of oregano oil, I have not had it. And I know there are other things playing out, and my diet is better, my health is better, but it wasn't then 10 years ago. So I think it has something to do with this amazing antibiotic. It's a natural antibiotic, antiviral, and antimicrobial. The antimicrobial means it kills off parasites as well. So a couple drops under your tongue twice a day. A key point is never buy extra strength. Never buy extra strength. The extra strength is way too strong. So what you want is no higher than about 80% of the extra special ingredients. I'm just reading it here. It's carfentanil. I've never actually pronounced that in real life. I just realized. Yeah, so you want about 75 to 80% be that ingredient. Anytime it's going over 80% and getting into the 95%, it's mean. It burns, it hurts, and the side effects I've seen from clients who've used it have all happened with the extra strength. And it's nasty, it's terrible, don't do it. Regular strength works like a charm, not pleasant. Take a sip of water after you're done. Raw local honey, it's a natural antibiotic, as well as it soothes the throat beautifully. It was actually studied against cough syrup and been found to be just as actually more effective. So a tablespoon when you have a sore throat, add it to your tea. It's really, really beautiful. And that brings us to this recipe. And I found it today on Mind Body Green website. It looks amazing. The reviews were amazing. I haven't tried it myself. So when you try it, let me know how you like it, if you try it. And it has this really beautiful balance of raw honey, raw garlic with the cinnamon and ginger to warm you up, and some turmeric as an anti-inflammatory. And you mix it into a paste, and you enjoy, and just you eat it while you need it. In the original recipe, the ginger and the turmeric root were listed as peel and mince. I don't peel anything, and nor would I mince it myself. I grate it because grating is so much easier. So if it doesn't work out because it needed to be minced and peeled, let me know. But generally, grating works like a charm, and I'm not going to take those extra steps. So let me know how you like it, if it works. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions in just a minute. So start typing any questions that you might have on fall and winter foods, or any questions you might have in the chat. And I just want to mention the upcoming webinars. So the first one is the next one in this series. So in this series, we have a monthly webinar with 2 in December. And the November one, we're getting close to the end, is the fallacy of the math of nutrition. And so this one is all about why counting doesn't work. We're going to be looking at how problematic calories are. Calories are not an accurate measurement of food, and how food affects us and affects our body. Calories in, calories out does not work. And we're going to look at why, as well as why we feel this, why health experts tell us to count carbs, fats, and proteins, why they go in and out of style. And so we're going to be looking at all of that in that webinar. And then I also have 2 bonus webinars in November, and it is on a passion project of mine, the productivity diet. I wrote, it's a webinar as well as a workshop, and I wrote it because I found that what I was eating, even though I was eating a healthy diet, was not helping me in my day. And that with a few dietary tweaks, I went from struggling to get everything done to flying through my to-do list. This morning, I worked for 2 hours and got done what would take me about at least a day and a half to 2 days to do. Like, I couldn't believe it. Afterward, when I stopped for lunch, I was like, did I just get that done? Because it didn't feel like I worked that hard. And so that's what I've put together in this webinar and workshop. So the webinar will give you all of the things that you need to know to create this balance, and then the workshop is much more hands-on. So the workshop goes through each step in much more detail, adding recipes and all of the good stuff, all of the hand-holding that it helps when you're making these changes. There'll also be a Facebook group so we can share recipes and ideas and everything. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions. I see that Lorna is asking for the recipe again, so I'll put that slide up so you guys can see it. I will also be adding all of those, the links to those webinars on the email that I send out for the recording. So if there, I don't see any questions in yet, so I'm going to say goodbye now. If you're watching this recording and you have any questions, just send them to me by email. You guys who are on the webinar, I'm not going anywhere. I'll wait around for a little bit to see if any questions come in. Otherwise, thank you so much for spending your evening with me. I really, really appreciate it. I love doing these webinars, and I can only do them because you guys show up. So thanks so much, and I'm going to just stop my video just so I can read properly, and the recording, and I will stay on to answer any more questions. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great evening.